My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm just an ordinary housewife who recently turned 38. I live with my husband John and our 8-year-old daughter Amy in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Boston. Our home is a 2-story red brick house surrounded by a white picket fence. In the backyard, there's a big maple tree that turns beautifully red in the fall. John is 43 and works as a project manager at a large local IT company. He's a hard-working and family-oriented husband. It's become our tradition to enjoy barbecues in the yard or go on family hikes on holidays. I work as a librarian at the local elementary school. Being surrounded by books is my greatest joy. In the midst of such peaceful days, we recently had some exciting news. I'm pregnant with our second child. My morning sickness has been severe, causing me to miss work more often. Perhaps out of concern for me, John recently gave me the latest smartphone as a pregnancy gift, saying, "So you can take lots of pictures of the baby." Amy is an energetic and curious 8-year-old girl. With her light brown hair and big green eyes, she looks just like a Disney princess. She excels in school, especially in science and computer subjects. Recently, Amy has become interested in programming. On weekends, she attends programming classes for children. When she talks about wanting to work with computers like Daddy in the future, her eyes sparkling, John and I find it heartwarming. Amy loves playing with the old tablet she got from her father. Sometimes she proudly shows me, saying, "Mom, look. I made a new app." Every time this happens, I, as a mother with a tech-savvy daughter, feel a bit conflicted. When Amy saw the new smartphone John gave me, her eyes lit up. "Mom, that phone is amazing. Can I use it too?" she asked, full of curiosity. I hesitated a bit but replied, "Well, I suppose you can use it occasionally." At that moment, what flashed through my mind was the happy everyday life of our family. But little did I know then that this new smartphone would drastically change our family's life. A few days later, on a Saturday morning, as I was preparing breakfast, Amy came running into the kitchen in her pajamas. "Mom, can I use the new phone today?" she asked. I hesitated a little but, seeing Amy's expectant eyes, I said, "All right. But be careful with it," and handed it over. Amy happily took the phone and sat on the living room sofa, starting to fiddle with it. After a while, her expression seemed to cloud over a bit. "What's wrong, Amy?" I asked. "Mom, there's something weird about this phone," she answered with a puzzled look. I was a bit surprised and sat down next to Amy. "What do you mean?" Amy frowned and said, "There's a strange app here. But when I try to open it, it needs a password." I felt a little uneasy but replied, "It must be one of Daddy's work apps." However, Amy didn't seem convinced. That afternoon, as I was folding laundry, Amy burst into the room. She looked pale and seemed to be trembling. "Mom, something terrible has happened," Amy's voice was shaking. "What's wrong?" I asked, worried. Amy said in a small voice, "You know, I managed to open that app." "What? How?" I used a method I learned in programming class to bypass the password, Amy said apologetically. And what happened? Amy continued fearfully, Mom, there seems to be a listening device in that phone. I was speechless. A listening device? What do you mean? Amy explained with a face on the verge of tears. There was a program in the app that records our conversations. And it seems to be constantly sending the phone's location information too. My mind went blank. I couldn't believe that my husband had been monitoring us. Mom, I'm scared. Amy started crying. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Amy, you did well to find this. Thank you for telling me. That night, when John called to say he'd be late from work, Amy and I held a secret strategy meeting. Amy, you must not tell Dad about this under any circumstances, I told my daughter with a serious expression. Amy nodded slightly. Okay, I understand. But what are we going to do with this phone? I thought for a moment before answering. We need to dispose of it. But we have to do it without your father noticing. How? Amy asked. Well, I formulated a plan. Tomorrow morning, after your father leaves for work, we'll pretend that I accidentally dropped the phone. Amy hesitated a bit before saying, But Mom, isn't it wrong to lie? My heart ached at my daughter's honesty, but I explained, this is a special case. It's to protect us. The next morning, right after John left for work, Amy and I put our plan into action. Are you ready? I asked Amy. Amy nodded nervously. We went out to the veranda. Amy held the phone, taking a deep breath. Now, Amy. Amy threw the phone with all her might. The phone arced through the air and fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Stop! I shouted, acting. Amy looked up at me with a face about to cry. I'm sorry, Mom. It slipped from my hand. I hugged my daughter. It's okay, accidents happen. At that moment, we felt a small sense of victory. But we also understood that this was just the beginning. After the smartphone was smashed to pieces, Amy and I quickly set about destroying the evidence. Amy, go back inside and bring the vacuum cleaner, I instructed in a low voice. While Amy was fetching the vacuum, I checked our surroundings, worried about the neighbors noticing. Fortunately, probably due to the early hour, no one seemed to have noticed. When Amy returned, we quickly vacuumed up the fragments. We picked up the larger pieces by hand and put them in a plastic bag. Is this okay, Mom? Amy asked anxiously. You did well, Amy, I gently hugged my daughter's shoulders. But we're not done yet. Back in the house, we made a plan to further crush the collected fragments and dispose of them in multiple garbage bags. Amy, when Dad comes home, this is what you'll say, I explained to my daughter. You'll say, I wanted to look at the phone, but I accidentally dropped it. Amy nodded, albeit with some hesitation. I understand, Mom. But Dad will surely be angry. Yes, he probably will. But we had no choice, I sighed deeply. That evening, when John came home, we gave him our prepared explanation. As expected, John was furious, but our act seemed to have worked. He showed no signs of suspicion. However, this incident cast a large shadow over my heart. Why had John planted a listening device? Why did he need to monitor our conversations? As I began to doubt my husband's actions, small changes that I had never paid attention to before started to bother me. His late returns home had increased. Sudden work on holidays. He never let go of his mobile phone. Amy, I called my daughter one day. Mom needs to investigate Dad more closely. Amy nodded with a serious expression. Okay, I understand. I'll help too. And so, Amy and I's secret investigation began. We started by observing John's behavior patterns. Amy began recording John's return times in her own way. Mom, Dad always comes home late on Thursdays, Amy shared her observation. Based on this information, I decided to track John's movements on Thursdays. I bought a GPS tracker and secretly attached it to John's car. Amy, I know this isn't right, I explained to my daughter, feeling guilty. But we need to know the truth. Amy nodded silently. After several weeks of investigation, we finally obtained decisive evidence. On Thursday night, John's car was heading towards an upscale residential area, in the opposite direction from his company. Mom, Dad stopped there, Amy pointed at the computer screen. My heart felt tight. That place was an apartment where a young woman lived. The following Thursday, I asked a friend to babysit and went alone to that apartment. What I saw there was John and a young woman standing close together. As I took photos for evidence, various emotions swirled inside me. Anger, sadness, the pain of betrayal. And it was also the moment when the mystery of the listening device was solved. When I returned home, I told Amy the truth she had been waiting for. Amy, it was just as Mom thought, I said, holding back tears. Amy silently hugged me. Your father planted the listening device to make sure his affair wasn't discovered, I muttered bitterly. Mom, what are we going to do now? Amy asked anxiously. I took a deep breath and answered, we have to confront Dad with the truth. That night, Amy and I talked for a long time. About the future of our family, and how we would live from now on. Amidst the sadness and anger, I felt our bond grow stronger. And we resolved to overcome this difficulty and start a new life. For several days after learning the truth, I spent sleepless nights. Amy looked at me worriedly, but I tried to maintain a calm demeanor to avoid causing her extra concern. Finally, I made up my mind. On Friday night, I waited for John to come home. I'm home, John's voice came from the entrance. Welcome back, I responded coldly. John entered the living room and stopped in his tracks when he saw my expression. What's wrong? Did something happen? Sit down, I pointed to the sofa. We need to talk. John sat down with a confused look. I slowly took out the evidence photos and laid them on the table. What's this? The blood drained from John's face. You don't need to explain, I said quietly but firmly. This is evidence of your affair. John stared at the photos, lost for words. Why? My voice trembled. Why did you do this? John looked up. Sarah, listen, there's a reason for this. A reason? I raised my voice. What reason could justify betraying your family? At that moment, Amy entered the room. Dad, why are you making Mom sad? John looked at his daughter in surprise. Amy, this is adult talk. Go back to your room. No, I interrupted. Amy has the right to hear this. She's a victim too. Victim? What are you talking about? John looked confused. The listening device, I said. Amy found out that you were monitoring us. John's face turned pale. No way, that smartphone. Yes, that smartphone, I said coldly. You were monitoring us to keep your secret. John held his head in his hands. No, that's not it. I just what? Amy cried out. Dad, don't you love us? John looked at his daughter, tears in his eyes. No, Amy. Dad loves you. It's just. If you love us, why did you do this? I said, my voice shaking. A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, John spoke. I was weak. The stress from work and I don't want to hear excuses, I interrupted. We're done. Sarah, wait, John said desperately. Can't you give me another chance? For the family. I took a deep breath. For the family. You're the one who destroyed the family. Amy held my hand. Mom, we can make it on our own. I hugged my daughter and turned back to John. I'm filing for divorce. I'll contact you through a lawyer. John collapsed into his seat. Sarah, Amy, I'm so sorry. We silently looked at John, then quietly left the room. That night, Amy and I talked for a long time. We cried and comforted each other. Mom, we'll be okay, right? Amy asked anxiously. Yes, we'll be fine. I hugged my daughter tightly. We have each other. A few months later, the divorce was finalized, and Amy and I moved to a new home. It was a small apartment, but it felt like the beginning of our new life. A year has passed since then. Amy has adjusted to her new school and is further developing her programming talent. I continue my work at the library while starting to study psychology online. I hadn't been in contact with John since the divorce, but 3 months ago, I suddenly received an email. He wrote that his relationship with the woman he had an affair with had ended, and he was deeply reflecting on his actions. He started counseling and is addressing his alcohol dependence. Honestly, I felt conflicted. But I feel the need to build a peaceful relationship, especially for Amy's sake. Last week, I allowed Amy to meet with John. Amy was a bit nervous, but when she came back, she had a slightly brighter expression. Dad is really sorry, Amy said. But I prefer living with you, Mom. Those words made my heart swell. One evening, as Amy and I were walking in the park, Amy suddenly stopped. Mom, look. Amy pointed at the sky. Looking up, we saw a beautiful rainbow stretching across the entire sky. It's beautiful, I exclaimed in admiration. Hey Mom, I've heard that rainbows are a symbol of hope, Amy said. I looked at my daughter and smiled. That's right. Maybe it's a symbol of our new life. Amy squeezed my hand tightly. Mom, I'm sure we'll be even happier from now on. Feeling tears welling up, I nodded. Yes, that's right. Let's do our best together. At that moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from John. Can I come to Amy's next programming contest? I asked Amy, Dad wants to come to your next contest. What do you think? Amy thought for a moment before answering, that's okay. But only if you're there with me, Mom. Of course, I hugged my daughter. Looking up at the rainbow, I made a silent vow. No matter what difficulties lie ahead, I will overcome them together with Amy. And I believe our future will shine as beautifully as this rainbow. We can't change the past, but we can change the future depending on us. Maybe we can move forward little by little in our relationship with John too. But for now, I want to focus on the new life with Amy. Like this rainbow, our